Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I work at the NFI Family Center. And yes, I would probably not wear this to the office.
Thank you.
Yep.
Renee.
Renee, and I work out of Springfield HCRS. And yes, I have on my COVID outfit.
Great. Thank you.
Gloves are solidly on my feet today.
Thanks. Monica.
I'm Monica Dara. I work for NFI St. Albans with Post Permanence, and I have my slippers on.
Thank you. Sharon.
I'm Sharon. I work out of Burlington. And yes, I have a COVID outfit on. Totally.
Perfect. Jennifer.
Hello, I'm Jennifer. Work at a UVM at the partnership and here in Burlington. I can't kick my leg as high up in the air as Amy to show you. I have like a semi-COVID, like their pants I probably could wear to work with something over them. So half and half.
Thank you. Heather.
Hi, Heather Bissett. I work out of Middlebury through the Counseling Service of Addison County. And I'm just wearing a regular outfit that I would wear for work because I do outreach, right? So we're always pretty casual when it comes to our home visiting. So I actually have a skirt on, which yesterday Cassandra was asking me, how can I home visit in skirts and play with kids? I'm like, I don't know, I do it. So it's a long skirt.
Thank you. Sarah.
Hello, I'm Sarah. I work at the NFI Family Center, and I just put on my COVID outfit for this meeting. So yes.
Thank you. Cassandra.
Hi, I'm Cassandra. I work at the Counseling Service of Addison County with Heather, and I am wearing an outfit that's presentable in the public domain today.
Perfect. Prudence.
Hi, I'm Prudence Trombley, and I work for the Howard Center. And I have to say that I've enjoyed a summer of much more relaxed attire, wearing shorts and flip-flops that normally I wouldn't. So I'm appreciating it.
Great. Thank you. Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Taylor. I work at Howard Center with the Family and Community-Based Services, and I am definitely wearing a COVID outfit and also in my COVID office, spending a lot more time doing calls and stuff outside.
Great. Hey, welcome, Erica. You arrived just in time for introduction, so it's a brief, your name, where you work, and if you're wearing a COVID outfit, meaning your top doesn't match your bottoms.
Yeah, sorry that I'm a little late. Yeah, my name is Erica Meiderks. I am a clinician with NFI Family Center. And I am wearing a COVID outfit because I'm actually currently pregnant, so my buttons only go this far. So that is my COVID outfit, to sort of just from basically chest up is all I got.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing. Well,
hi, Erica. Congratulations. Long time no see.
Great. Well, good. I'm glad everyone's here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy days. You know, as you know, you've been aware of different conversations and emails that I've sent out around how do we make RPC Plus more interculturally responsive. And I just want to start this training by reading what I've written in all of our new manuals that we're sending out to folks, just to summarize why we're doing this. So bear with me. I know it's not always cool to read during a training, but I just want to make sure that I present this accurately. So it'll just take me a minute. So, in the summer of 2020, amidst a worldwide racial injustice reawakening, RPC Plus in Vermont made some long overdue and very significant changes to our curriculum. As a comprehensive workshop that educates caregivers about caring for children and youth who have experienced trauma, we have been remiss to not more fully address racial trauma, as well as to more fully incorporate an intercultural responsiveness to all the ways that difference, race, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity, religion, disability, and economic status impacts caregivers and the children and youth in their care. The goal of these intercultural responsiveness enhancements is to create space for ongoing dialogue about the ways that cultural differences impact the care that is provided to children, youth in foster, adoptive, or kin placements, and to assist caregivers in recognizing the impact of discrimination and bias on the children and youth in their homes and develop tools for best supporting them. So that's the vision. You know, as you know, we're all living through this time, so we're all very well aware of some of the things that are going on in our country right now in terms of racial discrimination and anti-racism movements that are happening. This is not new stuff, and it's stuff we should have been paying closer attention to in terms of RPC Plus, and we're doing it now. So that's the vision. That's why I'm having all of you come together so that we can share this together. So before we move on, I'm going to put Ruth on the spot so she can just introduce herself. Oh, she just went
sorry.
away.
Where did I just go? I'm sorry.
You'll come back, I think. So Ruth, the question is, who are you? Where are you from? And if you're wearing a COVID outfit or not, meaning that your top and bottom isn't matching. That's our whole introduction.
All right, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd like to try to find you all again. I don't know where you went, but oh, now I'm up. Are you there?
We're here.
No.
We can hear you.
Okay, so I will find you again. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I pushed that. No, that's not that. I am Ruth D'Angelo, and I am from the Howard Center. And what else did you want to know?
Are you wearing a COVID outfit, meaning your top doesn't match your
wearing
bottom?
a COVID outfit. I am matched. As a matter of fact, I'm late because I was freezing and I needed to find something warm to wear. And so I was digging through my drawers because all my summer stuff is still, around because I want us to be in summer forever.
Perfect.
So yeah.
Well, you're in good company. Thank you. So the vision of doing this new curriculum is that caregivers will have three things as a result of this. One, they'll have a greater understanding of the impact of cultural differences on themselves as well as the children in their care. They'll better be able to support the children in their care who have historically faced discrimination, prejudice, bullying, that they'll be better equipped to deal with those things. And that it'll create a deeper level of connection and understanding between the caregivers in the class and you and the caregivers. You know, as you all know, one of the beauties of RPC Plus is the connection that folks have. So hopefully this is one more way to enhance that connection. So what we're going to do today, we're done at 2 o'clock. If someone reminds me and we need to take a short 5-minute break somewhere so folks can stretch, that's fine. Just, I probably won't remember, so feel free to yell at me. So what I'm going to do is first give a brief overview of the changes, so kind of a summary of the changes, then talk about how like kind of the mental preparation that you need to do to teach some of this. And then we'll actually go through all of the slides that have changed, including some of the new videos. So that's what we're going to do today. So questions, comments before I jump into that? Does anyone have anything they want to say or ask before we jump in a little bit? Great. I am recording this. There are a couple of people that weren't able to make either training, so it is being recorded, so just be aware of that piece. So in general, there were a number of small changes that I made. So the small changes are things like there are photos, a number of the photos tend to have white able-bodied people. There are a number of quotes that are sprinkled throughout it, and they're all white men who are talking, from Harry Potter to Walt Whitman to Mr. Rogers. So I looked for some ways. So those are small changes, but important changes. So some of those are sprinkled throughout the class. And then I've changed some of the discussion questions. So for instance, in the first class, we watched the removed film. And in that film, Kira, the primary foster mother, is Black and Zoe is white. We never talk about that. Like, that's never part of our conversation. So I've added some other questions about, acknowledging that piece, that there is that racial difference between them. How might that impact their relationship? How might it impact how Kira parents Zoe? How might it impact the relationship with the birth family? Then I asked the question, so what if their races were reversed? How would that be different? So it'll be you leading some of those conversations, asking questions. So what if Zoe had a developmental disability? How might this have looked different, right? What if they had significant religious differences? How might this look different? So sprinkled throughout it whenever there's a discussion. So, with the family tale and some of the other things, I've sprinkled in more thought-provoking questions that touch on other aspects of diversity. So that's one set of changes that goes through the whole curriculum. The most significant changes are to weeks 8 and 9. So the reason I chose those 2 weeks, one, some of the things in there are a bit repetitive because during the tip section, some of those things are already covered. So it felt like it was okay to bump those out. That being said, it wasn't easy to bump anything out. As you know, this curriculum is way too jam-packed already. So it was painful making those cuts, but I did it. The other piece of why I've waited so late, well, there are little pieces interspersed even from the very first week. But the reason I waited until that late in the class is because by then, two things will happen. One, there'll be a greater sense of trust in the room, right? So the caregivers in the room will have more trust with each other. You and they will have more trust with each other. And you will have a pretty good sense by then who might really struggle with some of these issues, right? You might get a sense if there's someone who's really going to get defensive or get upset or have whatever. So hopefully you'll be kind of thinking ahead of time how you're going to anticipate moving into these deeper issues. So we will definitely go into weeks 8 and 9 more before the end of today, but the short version of what's happening in those 2 weeks is we talk about what we mean by this concept of intercultural responsiveness. So we have a conversation about that. There's an activity using something called the culture wheel, where we really look at all the various aspects of culture and encourage caregivers to look at themselves and also look at the children in their care, and then the interplay between the two. We take a deeper dive into 3 aspects of diversity, and those 3 are race, LGBTQ, and disability. Of course, there are many other aspects of diversity that we could dive into, but I picked those 3 intentionally. I think you can all guess why, right? Certainly race and LGBTQ can be hot button issues. It affects a lot of our kids, and how can we support them? And disability also affects so many of our children, both hidden disabilities and obvious disabilities, and how can we work with caregivers best to support those kids? Then we have 3 scenarios based on those 3 things: race, LGBTQ, and disability. So scenarios for folks to grapple with. We dive into intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, and racial trauma, stuff that we kind of, some of you might bring those things up, but they're not an official part of the curriculum. And then we do a piece on ACEs, which is a big piece, which is a part of the curriculum and really needs to be tapped into. So those are the overview of the things that are changed. Then, of course, I had to remove some things. So just so you're aware of those things that are removed. The Being Within Shark music video. There's a section on how you can help differentiating, tuning in, setting an example. The What's My Emotion game. One of the Circle of Security videos. In week 8, there's a whole section which is talking about trauma, which felt repetitive to me, and the Brene Brown empathy video. You will still have all of those slides. I put them at the very end of the PowerPoint and there's a way to hide slides, and I hid them. If you have extra time and you want to use any of those slides, you absolutely can. So they're there, but I'm not considering them a main part of the curriculum anymore. Okay. Questions or comments about what I said so far? Okay. By Monday, I will send out another email to all of you, and It'll be a pretty big email, but what will be in there are all the new PowerPoints. They'll actually be sent to you via UVM file transfer because they're big. So you'll get all of the new updated PowerPoints. You'll get guidelines for teaching the class, so kind of some hints about teaching it, as well as how to teach, as well as all the guidelines for teaching it virtually. Probably for the next year, if we're going to teach this class, we're going to have to teach it virtually. So it's going to be some hints about that. It'll be links to all the pre-work emails. So especially those of you who use those already, NFI and Howard Center, these are new links to the pre-work emails are new and different. So throw away the old stuff, use this new one. And then there'll be, so most people are going to either have, if some of you might give them a physical handbook. We've not printed new handbooks, so they would get an old version of the handbook, and then there's an addendum, a printed addendum that can go with that has all the intercultural pieces in there. So I'll send you files for those, or I've updated the manual with the new intercultural responsiveness stuff virtually. So if you're going to send them a virtual manual, it will be updated. If they're going to use a hard copy of the manual, they need to have the addendum. And if that's confusing, when you're about to teach a class, just call me and we'll talk through it to make sure you have the right things to give people.
Amy,
Yes.
would we be receiving a new flash drive?
You wouldn't be receiving a new flash drive. If you've lost your old one, contact me and I can figure out a way to get you one. I have some. Ideally, what you would do is just put the new slides on and erase the old slides and put the new slides on. That's what I would suggest. But if you get stuck around that, I do have some thumb drives that I can send individual folks. Any other questions? So I just looked at my clock and I'm right on time. So that's, as trainers, that's a really good feeling and you want to pat yourself on the back. So yay. So the next piece that I want us to talk about is how you're going to teach this. I'm sure there's a range of knowledge and experience in this room around your comfort level, your whatever curriculum you already have that you've been in terms of teaching anything related to cultural issues. So I'm going to do 2 polls so we can just get a sense of where we all are. So both these polls are anonymous, so no one knows who's answering them, but just this first one is about race. If folks could take a minute to check one of these boxes, that would be great. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. Everyone voted. And here's where we are. All right, we have one warrior. We have at least one warrior out there. Great. Although be careful while teaching. Many people are in that place of striving to be an anti-racist, doing different things, reading books, going to workshops, talking with colleagues. And then some folks, being really honest, I want to be better at this, but not really sure where to start. So let me just open up the conversation. What are folks doing? Where do you feel stuck? What would be helpful as you think about having conversations about racism, anti-racism, white privilege, those kinds of things? Or how do you think it will be having those conversations while teaching RPC Plus?
So I get stuck. I have a parent who is parenting a mixed race child, and the parent's white. And she says, "Oh, I don't see color. It doesn't make any difference to me." And she kind of struggles cognitively. So I'm trying to help her understand that that's really not helpful to her child, and she's not getting it. So any suggestions that you have around helping the parent to sort of simplifying it down into a level that's easily understandable would be helpful for me.
Does anyone have some immediate thoughts or resources for Monica?
It's a ways away, but I was thinking of the offering that Sharon's doing in December, specifically on this topic for caregivers. It's a virtual offering.
I have offered her that, but she's not interested.
I wonder if just having a conversation with her on how she would respond if someone called her child a derogatory term, or someone wondered why she was looking after a child who was mixed race. I wonder if you could just do some like role playing around that to sort of soften her up and yeah, see what came out of that.
I love that suggestion. Thank you.
Also, maybe looking at it from her child's perspective around, well, what if the child in your care does see color and does see the difference in race? Like, how can you respond to that? Seeing if she can put herself in a different perspective that way.
I'm guessing this might be the kind of thing that could come up in a class, that someone could say, why are we talking about this? I don't see color. I'm not racist. I'm not, right?
I have a great article that I found in prepping for the December offering, and people of color saying when well-intentioned people say I don't feel color, it feels like they're saying I don't hear you, I don't see you, I don't understand you. And I think if it's a relationship that you have some trust in, to be able to share that perspective, and just what that would mean to you. If someone would, people of color are saying this, how would that feel to you if you felt like you weren't seen, heard, known, accepted?
Thank you, Sharon. I noticed Jennifer put a resource in the chat box. As we're talking today, if anyone has resources around having some of these conversations or around teaching this, please add them to the chat box or let us know about that. Other initial thoughts, concerns around how you will talk about this or how you have talked about this in a class?
A little bit of concern about talking about this in the class in Springfield, given that right now I know there's a lot of racial tension in the school system between staff and children, between staff and staff. There are several children of color in the community, whether they be, completely Black or biracial or of other heritage. And there's a huge struggle for them to not feel discriminated against, and how to do this in a politically neutral way so that I'm supporting people while maintaining professionalism and maintaining those boundaries of like, go fight that, go, right? Like, I don't want to like start a huge battle. At the same time, I want to reinforce the positive messages and reinforce inclusion and support them with the struggles and how to do that.
I think these steps are really incremental. I remember being in the classroom when they were in the kindergartens, when there were kids who were identifying as the opposite gender. And just having a conversation with the public school in general about, instead of saying boys and girls line up, which for some kids was a little challenging because they wanted to be the opposite, and then they would be called out by their teachers or peers, and presented some discomfort, to sort of use different language, like everyone in blue sneakers line up, or everybody wearing a red shirt line up, which a lot of teachers do. But I feel like these conversations are really incremental, and we're not out to change anybody's minds. We're out to listen to the other and understand where they're coming from and find books that are multiracial, find toys that are multiracial, include different stories in history, different fairy tales, different everything, and just show a more expansive world rather than that white lens that most of us grew up with.
Thanks, Cassandra. You know, Renee, I think you also hit on kind of the crux of, you know, we're trainers, we're instructors, we're creating an environment that for people to learn and feel safe, for folks who may have their own history of racial trauma, right, that are in the room with us. And how do we talk about this information without making, without creating a hostile environment in the room, which sometimes just can happen, right? I think when we were talking earlier with Monica about her situation is when we can always come back to the child, keep bringing it back to the child. How do we support that child? You know, I think a lot about, in RPC Plus, we talk about having a trauma lens, right? So there's also a way to have an intercultural lens, to look at things through the lens of culture. I'm not saying it's easy and you're not going to run into some snafus. My hope is the curriculum isn't about hitting people over the head, but it's about hopefully opening people's minds. So this is also a grand experiment, right? No one has taught this curriculum yet. So I know folks are starting. I'm going to be starting a class soon. I know a few people in this room are starting classes. So we're all going to try this out and see how it goes. And my hope is either, you know, in the spring, in the winter or the spring, that we can come back together or check in with each other to see what parts of the curriculum work and what parts don't. All right, let me do another poll. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Erica.
Oh, I was actually just wondering, is there ideas or reasoning behind waiting until like week 8 or 9 to bring up identity and particularly race, versus sort of like having it from the get-go, just naming it as an element within the room, whether it be within caregivers caring for children or you know, children themselves?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts about that. One, it is, week 1 is the removed movie, and we do bring it up in that conversation around the foster mother being Black and the foster daughter being white. So they started in that way. It was a challenge to figure out where to put things in the curriculum. Part of why those weeks 8 and 9 had more room and more flexibility. I also felt like there was a more of a sense of trust that happened by then. Now, we may go through it and it might make more sense that we flip things around and that we put stuff, more of that in the beginning. Certainly, if you have ideas or thoughts about what you want to do in your first class to address these issues, go ahead, report back, let me know how it goes, definitely. Heather, yeah.
So what I've done, and it certainly depends on the class, but when we show the movie Removed, and I think a lot of this is based on my experience having worked in a therapeutic foster care program in a different state before coming back home to Vermont. But I'll often bring up that it's often pretty rare that a foster parent is Black and that the foster kiddo is white, that typically in our system it's the reverse of that. So I've often brought that up as a conversation. I do know when I used to work in a therapeutic foster care program, we did have some Black foster parents raising white children, and yet that was typically not the norm. So I've been trying to at least bring up that conversation to have it, because you know, our removed video is pretty atypical as far as how the foster care system works.
Right. Thanks, Heather. All right, let me bump to this other poll. Okay, everyone's voted. Here are our results. So great. Everyone feels like this is something they can talk about and want to talk about. Um, Certainly, you know, the terminology, actually, I'm going to stop sharing. Is it still showing the poll? Okay, good. So, you know, the terminology around LGBTQ issues has been updated and changing, and so that can be something that you need to educate yourself about. In the updated manual for participants, there are all kinds of definitions in there if you feel like you need to brush up on those things. But just curious about folks' thoughts around addressing issues of gender identity and sexual orientation. How has that come up in RPC Plus, or how have you dealt with it in other situations? How has that gone? Or questions or concerns about it?
I think for me, just sort of in life, I'm never sure of what pronouns to use, and I'm not sure how to ask. I think that's the biggest thing that I run into. I don't want to be disrespectful, but I don't want to be like, so what do you want me to call you? You know,
Right.
kind of thing.
Right. Thoughts about that?
One way, yeah, one way to sort of really navigate that can be also with like within intake systems and having the ability for folks to put name as legal name, as well as what do you want to be called during our time together, what name do you want to use, and pronouns. That can be a great way to just sort of get that out in the open before sort of engaging in any kind of group or clinical relationship. There's also just sort of the idea of like introducing yourself first can often set the stage so that other folks can introduce themselves more comfortably. So you can say, yeah, my name's Erica. I use she and her pronouns. How about you? And that sometimes can be an easy way to do that.
With Zoom, one way to do that, you notice I changed my name. There's a way to change your name. If you wanted to do that, that would be a way to open that door to put the she, her pronouns or whatever pronouns someone chooses. That could be a way to help ease that conversation also. So with these topics and any other issues related to diversity, you have to do your own work, right? There are resources, there are tons of things out there, but a big piece of being able to stand up in front of a room and talk about these things in a meaningful way, to engage in conversations with other people, to be prepared for some of the mistakes, conflicts, things that are going to happen, you have to do your own internal work. So I'm encouraged to know that most folks are doing that. If you're not, I really just encourage you to look at other resources, talk to other people. There's tons of stuff out there. Encourage you to practice teaching some of the stuff. Do this with each other. I'm happy to meet with a group of folks if folks want to try talking about these things, and we can do that together. Go through some of the exercises in the curriculum and do some of those exercises yourself before you do it in front of a room. That can make a huge difference. I know one thing that I try and do is I try and anticipate the difficult conversations that might come up and then anticipate my response. I never get it exactly right, but it helps me before I go into a classroom to do that. I sent all of you an email this morning that had a handout. If folks are able to access that, that would be great. So I'll give you a minute to just access that and open it. I'm gonna open myself too. So we're just going to take about 2 minutes, and if everyone could just read through that, this is something that all participants will get, but if you could just read through that and then we'll talk about it, that would be great.
Amy, is the culture wheel supposed to be in this document?
It's not, unfortunately, but we will look at it a little bit later. Sorry about that. So as you are reading through that, take note if there are any of them that really stand out to you that you might be able to use in class or might be helpful in some of the conversations that you will have. So which ones stand out to folks or might be helpful as you think about teaching the class or think helpful in thinking about talking to particular caregivers?
For me, it's the use of they and them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
I think as soon
start
as we
saying
start
that,
using they and them, we start categorizing people and putting them in the outside or the other or the kind of negative space, and that's not helpful.
yes, definitely.
I think also the both and are important for people.
Yes, yes.
Just to understand it isn't necessarily one or the other.
Right, two seemingly opposing things can both be true.
Right.
It's a bit more positive as well, I find.
Yes. Heather?
I like the I statements, and I often use that in how I teach the class. And as an adopted person, I often talk about that we as adopted people are like a silent culture that is often discriminated against, and people don't realize they're doing this. So here we are talking about diversity, and yet we're not talking about the fact that these kids are in foster care and also adopted. And that's a culture in and of itself that I often feel discriminated against, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty emotional for me. And yet I try to use myself in that teaching. And I like that piece of just listening more and talking less, despite the fact that I talk a lot.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. Wherever we've had our own injuries or discrimination or felt left out, it can inform us. It can help us understand and then hopefully articulate that to other folks so they can have an opportunity to understand it more deeply.
And I often use the family tree, project that often happens in schools, where I think it often brings up a lot of feelings for our kids that are in foster care system and who are adopted, and just how there's such a lack of knowledge and understanding about, the foster care and adoption system as a whole, even within people that are a part of the system.
Yes, yes. The oops and ouch can be a really helpful thing. I think especially as we think of ourselves as trainers, I know I get anxious, right? I'm going to say the wrong thing, and I have said the wrong thing, right? And the best thing to do is to acknowledge that and then try and move on from there, but also to give other people that permission too.
I also think, I was just going to say that about the oops and ouch. I also think the part in the purple before the guidelines are listed, I think that could be a great response too to families who say, we don't see color. You know, it's a great sort of umbrella statement to open a conversation.
Thank you, Sharon. I would take a really strong stance. I hope this would never happen, but if anyone in a class says something derogatory to another person, you know, that I would immediately boot them from the class, right? Goodbye. If they're on a Zoom call, you hit delete. If they're in the room, you end class and ask, you know, take a break and ask that person to leave. I mean, that just can't happen. And again, I hope that doesn't happen, but. Any other thoughts or comments about this piece or how to use it?
I really appreciate the you can disagree, but it's not okay to blame. I think that's an important thing to bring up, especially if you're having potentially conflictual conversations. It's the difference between different ideas, and it doesn't have to get personal, and it shouldn't.
Yes. So this material is in their written material. It's not something that is explicitly gone over in teaching the class. You might decide at some point, based on how you feel about this particular group, that you want to spend time explicitly going over this. You certainly could do that as an option. Any other thoughts about resources or how to teach this, or things you're worried about, or things that have helped you be successful in teaching any of these kind of more challenging topics? Okay. Does anyone want to take a 5-minute stretch break? This would be the moment to do it, because now I'm going to shift into the actual curriculum. Thumbs up if you want a 5-minute break. Okay, we want some 5-minute breaks. Okay, so let's everyone take a break. We'll come back here at 12:51. See you then.
account and can go to the Kin Foster Adoptive Caregiver section and select LGBTQ plus 101 and could take that because even though it's through the realm or the lens of being a caregiver, it really is any individual that's working with caregiving in a variety of roles, right? So I think it could be useful for many folks. And I know we've had people outside of foster parents take that.
Great. So Jennifer will put that link in the chat box. Thank you. So let me play this video, next video.
My son told me he kept who he was a secret for years. I wish I had known what he wanted to say.
A student told me at a pretty young age that they didn't want to be referred to as either he or she. I had to practice using different words for them.
When she was a young adult and told me that she had feelings for another girl, she said she always knew this, but was afraid to talk about it. I love her so much.
At first, she was holding hands with her friend because that's what young girls do. Then she was bullied for it, and I didn't understand what was happening. I wish I'd known more.
These are the voices of adults who care about young people who identify as LGBTQ. LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer questioning. Youth who identify as any of these orientations or statuses are at significantly increased risk for mental health problems, bullying and other violence, homelessness, substance use disorder, and even suicidal thoughts or behaviors. Because of the vulnerability of LGBTQ youth, it's critical for adults to be mindful of ways to better listen to the voices of these young people. Keep a few simple ideas in mind. Developmental stages. Friendships form in childhood, and romantic attractions in others can begin in adolescence. For adolescents, a desire for friendship or a closer connection with another person is normal. Pay attention to how and when the young people in your life express their romantic attention to others. How they want to express themselves at this point in their lives may include their identity as LGBTQ. Cultural influences. People receive messages from friends, family, their communities, and the media about what is acceptable. Negative messages about LGBTQ identity can be a significant reason that talking about their personal lives can be so hard. Being open to who they are and who they want to be can be the most difficult experience of their young lives. Identity and pronouns. LGBTQ youth may choose their own pronouns because of their feelings about the intersection between culture and gender. Many have chosen to use non-gendered pronouns such as they or their in order to avoid using gender identifiers, she, her, or he, him. Their choices should be respected and practiced by others, as it is a language shift that is important to a young person. Biology. LGBTQ youth will often discuss how their biological influences affect who they are attracted to and how they want to live their lives. These influences impact decisions about friendships, partners, social circles, clothes, and where and how they want to live their lives as adults. All of these factors are dealt with carefully and cautiously. Biology plays an important role for a person who may identify as LGBTQ. Parents, teachers, coaches, clergy, community leaders, and other adults have the opportunity to listen to LGBTQ youth. Children and adolescents often express themselves according to the expectations of their home communities and cultures. The hope for all is supportive, caring, non-judgmental environment. LGBTQ youth who are at increased risk for mental health and other problems can be offered confidence, safety, and security in who they are and how they express themselves by a trusted adult who is willing to listen to them. True listening means there is always help, and there is always hope.
So obviously that goes into some of the terminology, but also lays the groundwork for how to build positive and healthy relationships with queer youth. So So now the next piece is about ability and disability. The piece that always gets me is the part that students with disabilities are suspended 3 times more often than other children. Is always disturbing. I always appreciate this graphic. I don't, is it big enough for folks to read it all? So this begins to kind of talk about the concept of ableism, how our world is set up to really support people who are able-bodied, and that we miss the opportunity to support folks with disability. And then this video is a very lighthearted, fun video that depicts folks with mostly physical and mental disabilities getting ready for the Rio Paralympics a few years ago. But it's a really positive video, and it also, I think, it helps people feel a little bit more comfortable about folks with disabilities. So let me play that video for you. All right, here we go. 3 minutes.
Yes, I can, suddenly, yes, I can. Gee, I'm afraid to go on has turned into, yes, I can. Take a look, what do you see? 133 pounds of confidence, me. Got the feeling I can do anything, yes, I can. Something that sings in my blood is telling me, yes, I can. I was just born today, I can go all the way, yes, I can. 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 Hey, yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can! Are you ready? I can climb Everest. Yes, I can. I can fight here all night and never rest. Yes, I can. I was just born today. I can go all the way. Yes! I can.
Didn't you love that? So
That's really amazing.
I know. It's a very well done video too. Okay, so now you've got people in an upbeat mood, right? So they've watched this video, and then you would break people up into 3 groups to discuss you assign people to these different scenarios. So I'm just going to show you each of the scenarios. I'll wait long enough for everyone to read it, but it's 3 different scenarios that you would have folks talk about. So here's the first one. So then there are some included discussion questions about how would you respond to Michael? What would you say to the teacher? So just brings up some discussion questions with that piece. Here's the second scenario. So here again, trying to present a realistic situation. What would your response be to Sam? What would your response be to your son? What actions would you take to make sure that Sam was safe? So open up that conversation. And then the third scenario. So if you're teaching this virtually, you'd have to come up with some creative ways of helping people break up into groups to talk about these scenarios. But hopefully this also gets to a deeper level of understanding and questioning about this. Anything stand out to folks about the scenarios or challenges with presenting those or ways that might be useful? Questions?
I guess it's easy to be reactive, especially with the one where the child's being followed around the museum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a piece of me, if I was that parent, I would be pretty reactive initially and hopefully able to self-regulate. I would definitely want to call the museum and give them an earful, and definitely want to give the teacher an earful too. But then again, that sounds reactive. So I would want to kind of try to meet them both with a more open-minded discourse. But that would be challenging, especially, well, even the one with Sam too. I mean, they're all challenging. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that's a perfect example. So someone in the class, that's what they say out loud, right? So then that's a perfect opportunity to engage the co-class. So what's your advice for Cassandra? What should she do? How should she handle this situation? And you can hopefully create a dynamic in the classroom where folks can talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes sense now that this information comes during this week where we've kind of gone over caregiver self-regulation. We've gone over responding versus reacting. Like we've taught all these tools to get the parents to a point where they can begin to think about how they may respond in an effective way versus being reactive, even when that's your instinct.
Right.
So yeah, it makes sense, like with how you talked about the flow.
Mm-hmm. Good. And again, grand experiment. Give me feedback once you really teach this about how people respond to these scenarios. If it actually turns into a conversation that's fruitful and productive, that'd be helpful. Okay. So we finished that discussion, and now you're at the end of week 8, and this is a different homework question that we've had in the past. So again, tapping into the joyful aspects of cultural differences. We don't want to just talk about the hard stuff, but also noticing where there might be some rubs. So people are going to take this home and think about it. So now we move on to week 9. And so week 9, not to skip, this is just an outline of it. So week 9 is the connections and healing one. This is the one where same check-in question, same mindfulness activity. This is the one where we have people write down the things that they're connected to, and then we rip them apart and rip them up and pull them away from them. I'm just curious, those of you who taught this virtually, how did you do this activity virtually?
We did it like MASH style. So it's like pick a number between 1 and 10, and then like that's the number that you cross off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so you do this activity. Here you talk about, and part of the point of that activity is it talks about how children define themselves, who they are, and then we go into a family tale. Remember, the family tale is the story of Joey, Sandy, and John. So the story, same setup, go through the whole story. I should have skipped these slides, but do the same activity. And then we get to what about Jane, right? There's the big reveal. And so here's where we start talking about trauma being intergenerational. So that's a regular part of the curriculum that's already there. We talk about these pieces. And then this is a shift. These are new slides. So we talk about this concept of hurt people hurt people. And then there are 3 concepts to share here, which is all written out in the manual for you. Intergenerational trauma, historical trauma, and racial trauma, or race-based traumatic stress. So you would share a definition and explain these concepts to folks at this point. Then we shift into showing the ACEs video. This is I'm actually going to show you this video. It's a short video, but just so you can see it ahead of time.
What does your parents' divorce have to do with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. Anda and Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. and 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems, and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn more about interrupting the cycle of adversity and improving health and well-being for the next generation, please visit kpjrfilms.co.
So, quick and brief summary of ACEs. And then once you show the video, you do some reinforcing of the learning. So remind folks, so these are the 10 ACEs, but also to broaden that to talk about there are other adverse childhood experiences. These were the ones that were counted in that study, but certainly community violence, homelessness, discrimination, foster care, bullying, repeated medical procedures or life-threatening illnesses, death of a caregiver, loss of a caregiver due to deportation or migration. So all of these different things still are adverse childhood experiences that our children can experience. And that these are some of the outcomes. You know, this can freak people out a little bit, right? Especially if they've been keeping track of their own ACE score. So you're going to have participants that are sitting there going, oh my gosh, I'm a 3, I'm a 5, I'm an 8. Right? That will be happening to some of the caregivers in the room. So you want to reassure them of a couple of things. One, ACEs are common. People from all walks of life have them. ACEs are not destiny. Just because one individual person has a high ACE score does not mean that these things are true for them. In fact, the knowledge and awareness of what their ACE score is the kind of thing that can get them the help that they need. What's predictable is preventable. Right, that it helps people make changes in their own life, reduce child abuse, make societal changes. And this is a way of looking at society as a whole. So then, let me say, I think we're almost done with what's in this week. Right, then it's really important to talk about resiliency at this point. So make sure that is talked about. After doing the ACEs and all the things that we've been doing. So it'd be important to end this week on that. And then the rest of the week is typical stuff that was in the week. Yes, so that's the rest of the week. And then week 10, there are no changes. So there you have all the changes in your 10-week curriculum done in less than 2 hours. So my hope is that you'll all go out and teach this, that you'll report back about things that need to be tweaked or things that work really well, or if anything falls flat. I certainly want to hear about that also. Questions, thoughts, comments?
If groups are able to teach with this new content, remember how we did like that, like how's it going teaching RPC plus virtually, and did like a meeting like this to check in? It would be interesting to do something like that about this material. That I love these additions, and I'm worried that we're going to run out of time in the hour and a half that we have when we do the virtual RPC. We felt pretty jam-packed and did extend a class to 2 hours because of that. And we tried to prioritize what was most important, and all of this is so important. And so I'm just thinking about what that will look like when we are teaching it virtually with this added information.
So are you thinking it would be helpful to do that before folks teach, or have some folks go through it a couple times once and then
just share experiences after we do it or while we're doing it, what it's like to include more information.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you and then if I decide to add a half hour to more than one class or just one class? One. So you certainly could decide you want to teach all of your classes for 2 hours. That's a choice that if folks want to make that, I think it's a trade-off. I think caregivers at home with their kids all day, 2 hours can feel like a long time. So that is also something to experiment with. Maybe there are certain classes that you add that extra time to. Do you remember which week it was that you added the extra half hour?
I think it was week 6.
Okay.
Or 7, because we didn't finish everything from week 6. I can't remember now.
Week 6 is tough.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Cassandra.
Can I just ask, for those who taught the class using Zoom, how challenging was it or not? Can you give us some ideas on that? Hiccups, positives?
I actually thought it went really, really well. I did it with Erica and Sarah. And we had a smaller group. We had 7 or 8 caregivers. So I feel like that was a good number. I almost wouldn't want to go any larger for virtual, just because they were able to connect and seem like they formed relationships within the group. But the challenges were that there's so much information, and so sometimes the activities didn't land as well as they would have in person probably, or we weren't able to do some of the brainstorming things, but we got a little bit more creative with using different platforms as we went. So but yeah, we had a good turnout and good feedback from it.
What do you mean by different platforms?
Using the chat feature, or opening up a Word document and typing into it and sharing our screen, if it was a flip chart piece of paper. We don't use Zoom, so we aren't able to do breakout groups, but that would have been really helpful too.
What about the child's play?
So just so you know this piece, Cassandra, and other folks can answer too, ahead of time, people will see all of the videos of the caregivers with the children, but the playing part is tricky. I know folks have talked about doing some different things. How did you all do it?
I think we ended up giving it mostly as homework, and went over sort of the elements and the scoring rubrics, but because we couldn't have that sort of same level of practice in the space with participants and observers, we had to sort of describe it basically and then have folks do that as homework.
I know one of the things that Jennifer and I have talked about, and Christy and Renee, we're going to experiment with this when we teach our classes coming up, is to actually, we could do it, right? We could actually, I could have a pile of toys in front of me, and play with the toys, and then different folks could be the caregivers and make observations of me doing that. You could have the two, if you have two instructors doing that play back and forth to role model it. You could email folks ahead of time or tell them ahead of time, please find a handful of Legos before your next class, and we're going to practice it, and you could break people up. So I think there are some ways to do it. I haven't done it yet, so I'm not sure how it will really work, but we are going to experiment with that piece.
I know it would be extremely difficult, and challenging to do it virtually, but there's something to not just practicing at home, right, with kiddos, but to be able to role play. And so, even if I brought my screen down to the table and I was able to have, and if I don't have Legos at home, do I have a pen and paper that I can draw with? There's always something that someone would have in their home that they can pull together. Even if they forgot, and you start the class and say, okay, in the next 5 minutes, look at the slide and grab one of these items for our individual practice. And like Amy said, like breakout rooms would be great, but you could set it up so that Sharon and I would play right now, and then all of you could be observers and provide feedback to us and still learn from observing. I mean, a lot of the research that went into the skills from PCIT and CARE and helping the non-compliant child that went into TIPS saw that the actual kind of the efficacy and the competence of caregivers practicing the skills were increased from observing others, right? So like if I see Monica do a skill, I am better able to know what that skill is and then do that skill just from watching and observing and noting. So if you can work it in, I know it's a bit of a stretch, I just highly encourage you to do that. And I'm curious and excited to hear how that works for some of you as you continue to move forward with your virtual offerings.
Well, maybe I know that Christy and I and Renee and I are going to be doing some teaching together. Maybe we can videotape ourselves doing that and send it out to folks too. Right. So as we end, I want to make sure we end on time because it's Friday afternoon. Let's just go around and do a quick checkout and answer one or both of these questions. What are some things you still are concerned or have questions about? And what are you feeling hopeful about and wanting to try? It's fine to pass if you need to, but I'll just call on folks. Any lingering concerns and hopes about this? Cassandra, you're first.
I don't have any lingering concerns, and I'm hopeful that Heather and I can figure out the technology and do the Zooming, and I'm excited about picking it up again.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth.
I think my only concern was just the timing. So figuring out like fitting everything in. And yeah, I'm excited to teach it again at NFI. And yeah, it's a great class. I'm excited to add the new stuff in. Thanks for working on it.
Thank you. Erica.
Yeah, I almost want to say ditto. Yeah, time is always the trickiest part of getting through all the material. And yeah, looking forward to sort of doing this again. We talked about how I think we're excited to sort of facilitate like a second time now that we sort of have gone through like the material. So looking forward to sort of seeing what that's like, and especially with this new lens added to the work. So thank you for putting thought into that.
The second time of teaching RPC Plus is way better than the first time. Just want to say. Rachel, how about you?
I think to echo everyone else, still feeling a little concerned on time, especially with adding this new information. And I think it's going to create a lot more conversation, which is excellent. And still having to navigate those time pieces is always a tough balance. And I'm looking forward to, like everyone's saying, start teaching again, having new groups and teaching more people and teaching this content as well. I think it's a really needed and great addition.
Thank you. Heather.
I also want to say thanks for incorporating this new material. I think it's timely. It's great that you've put the effort into this. as you know, Amy, my only worry really right now is how to do this virtually. I'm great with the material. I've been doing this a long time. I don't have great technological skills. I was lucky to read that document that you sent us. So I was lucky to find it and open it up. So Sandra's going to team with me, so that gives me more confidence. So thanks for all your hard work and your support.
Thank you. Monica.
I'm still kind of thinking about my mom that I find challenging, to help her, but I'm hopeful that all the suggestions that that I've heard will help. And I'm also thinking about, could I videotape my grandson playing and you could use that for your thing? Because that would be really great to have a real child playing in a video that you could show, and then, you could demonstrate how to do it, and then the parents could do it too.
Great. Thank you. Sarah.
Hi, sorry, my internet is kicking me in and out, but I caught it. I am excited and concerned, I think, for the same thing. These conversations are going to be potentially challenging, but also are so necessary. And so I'm excited to do it. And I think my experience with RPC Plus was that the information was so well presented and walks people into it, holds their hand, but not in a patronizing way. It just is really, really well done. And I have the same feeling just being walked through this new information too. So I'm really excited and hopeful about that. And thank you so much, Amy, because it's so much work and it looks great.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Christy. Can't hear you. Oh, I think he's stuck. Oh. Still can't hear you. All right, Christy, we're going to come back to you. We can't hear you, so see if you can figure that out, and I'll come back to you in a second. Prudence.
I am super excited about the additions. I think it's great. I'm excited to get teaching it again. I think my only concern is time. I want the group that teaches with me together to plan on additional time. You can always end early if you don't need the time, but it's better than running out. So that's my biggest concern.
Thank you. Ruth.
Well, and my other two co-facilitators are just commented, I really love teaching this, and I feel like this new information or the added curriculum has been it's definitely needed, and I'm looking forward to it. I think I'm just I think my frustration comes with I like teaching it in person, because not doing so, there's a lot of missing pieces that we can't, that in person, and the ability to make those for families to make connections with one another is really missing this way. And I think that's my frustration with all of this. But it is what it is, and it is the way we have to do things now. I'm looking forward to, we're going to start our group in October, and looking forward to doing it. But again, I'm just really, I feel bad for this missed opportunity for some of our new families to come on to not have that connection, that in-person connection that happens. So
yeah, definitely. Renee?
Definitely the time is a concern. I'm also concerned about getting a virtual group off and starting and launching it in Springfield. We haven't had a successful one in a year now, so really wanting to get that to happen. And that's kind of where my hopes are. My hopes are that I'm going to do a lot of learning by co-teaching with you, Amy, and I'm going to do my best to launch Springfield and hope that it really does take off.
Great. Christy, it's your second chance. Oh, she's going to type in the chat box. Okay. Jennifer.
Well, I'm not leading an RPC Plus class virtually, but I'm so excited that all of you are. And I was sitting here thinking, this is a lot. If I were someone that was planning on, putting these revisions into practice, I would be appreciative and have hopes that once I get Amy's materials, that it makes sense to me, right? Like which files do I delete from my whatever they're called, my USB zip drive, right? And have the PowerPoint from today, because it's just a lot to kind of keep track of. So that's my only concern, is that it might be overwhelming for some of you to kind of keep track of, is this a new slide? What part of this slide is different than what I've done before? Because sometimes, you know, like I look to you, Heather, I know you've been doing this for a long time, because I was there a couple of times doing the care component before we even had tips. And so you get kind of in a rhythm of offering it and going through the curriculum. And so I know this is going to be challenging to tweak and shift, but I'm really hopeful and excited to hear through Amy and from all of you what this looks like to implement these changes in your future offerings. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you. Sharon, you're going to round us out.
Hi. So I also won't be teaching this, but will be teching this. And, you know, I have two concerns. One, I'm just curious about where talking about families that have addiction comes in, because there is also a whole bias and stereotype and judgment about that, and wondering how that fits into a cultural piece. And, you know, my other concern that I hear you all say is the time. And I just want to remind you all that this is more, it's an infusion, and that Amy did say she took some things out in order to put in these new components, and you'll probably even come up with more ways that you can sort of plug in cultural pieces. And I oversee the trainers for our regular trainers, and I'm developing a guidance for them for the technological pieces, and I'd be happy to share that with your group also, Amy.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I know we're 1 minute over, 2 minutes over now, so people have to run, go ahead, but this is wonderful. I feel really fortunate to be working with